In this video, we're going to look at how we might want to compare groups within our data. And we're going to use the sample project. So the sample project is good to use, available for everybody that has NVivo, and it's handy because a lot of work has already been done on the project. So we've got a number of interviews, and these are interviews also used on the pages. So the particular page that relates to this video would be the Stepping Up NVivo page on cases, case classifications, matrices, advanced queries, framework matrices. Now, I might want to make a comparison of the codes that have been used or what people have said according to different demographic data. So first of all, I'll just take a look and see what do we know? What cases have we got first of all? So we've got interview participants, and we've got some survey respondents. We've got some places. So these cases would be useful. So for instance, we might not mind who has said what, but we might want to know, is there a difference in how the participants talk about their environment and their home, depending on where they live? Are those participants that are living in an area where the fishing industry has declined, do they talk in a different way about this than those that live in perhaps the more affluent areas away from the coast? You'd need particular questions to ask when you get to this stage, but it's about comparison. So, for instance, do the older participants talk in a different way? So the kinds of things we can do, and I'm going to look here at the queries here. Let's see what we've got. So here we've got some attitude coding comparisons. So we're looking here to see how do the participants agree in the survey to different questions. Let's look at this one. It's one I meant to click on, attitudes towards fishing. So A, then, people who fish commercially, so participants who fish commercially, and B, participants who don't fish commercially. Okay, so we've got a difference there in their responses to different questions. So that would be interesting to look at. And again, this has probably gone across the survey data set, but I can click on any of the cells and see what we've got underneath. What is the data underpinning those numbers? And of course, as soon as we move to matrices, there's an inclination, a human inclination, to treat these numbers. They're not really numbers, not an abstract number. They're number of references. So we have to think about the meaning. Does it make a difference if someone says something positive many times? Does that make it more positive or more important? Now, something's happening here. Yeah, so it looks like this has come from the survey responses. And they're talking about the positive things that they've said. An important way of living, heritage, generations handed down to family. Yeah, it's come from a questionnaire, so yeah, typically we wouldn't expect that them to be saying a great deal, but we can go into the survey responses and see exactly where this has come from. It might be a different response, and we can certainly see fewer responses from those that fish there. A way of life, an important part of the economy, wonderful. Oh, there it is. But more negative. So sometimes I'm asked, well, should I do a chi-square on that? In a sense, you could. But whether you should is a different matter. It would just show that there are more negative responses, perhaps in one group over another, or perhaps not in this case. Certainly more people there that are not commercial fisher people in Group B. Largely, I would caution about using statistics on these tables and see it really as a way of getting to the data and categorizing the data. And sometimes it can be that somebody has said a lot in an interview, that they are quite verbose and they're quite repetitive, and that would lead then to a lot of answers. In this case, it's come from a survey, and so there'd be more of an argument that you could do something like chi-squared on this. But always I'd say, do it with caution and be aware of what it is you're doing. And certainly if it's coming from interviews, perhaps where you've coded an extract, might be one line long, then another code, perhaps you've got a whole paragraph, it becomes less meaningful to try and do any statistical analysis, but helpful to look at such charts here. So here I'm going to look at another chart here. So here we've got across the whole data set, persons commercial fishing, so or they're not a commercial fisher person, or a recreational fishing person, or not. So for work, for fun, and then their responses. And I'm always inclined to go into those higher numbers first, but we see where they come from. And again, that's come from, we can see clearly that's come from the questionnaire. Ooh. Let's go back because I've lost those views. Water quality attitudes. So again, this is looking across where do people live. Have they got different views where they live? So again, be really careful of reading from the numbers into that, but very useful to click on and see. So let's have a look here. Atlantic, what are they saying? Good, excellent. Okay, again, it's come from the interview transcripts. But we might see more negative views in other places. So you need to read underneath to see what is going on. Some have also got various text queries. Again, that could be done across the whole data set. But being able to make comparisons in this way, not necessarily at the level of the person, but across the whole data set, requires you to use cases. And so we recommend that you go and move to the Stepping Up in NVivo course to learn how to do that. So usually we would want to make some comparisons. Other things that can be very useful, and let's see if there's any here, the framework matrices. Yeah, so we've not got one in the sample, in this sample project. I can make one. Let's make a framework matrix. I'll put example framework matrix. So who should we have? So we have to have cases. You know, we can't just go to interview transcripts. So if you start to want to work with the matrices and something like framework matrices, which can be very useful and help you move, especially in the later part of the project, to start to think about how you might present some of your findings, how you might present some of your data. You have to get to grips with cases. So anything with any comparison of this type, if you're not just going interview by interview, you're using any kind of matrix, you're going to need to use cases in NVivo. Okay, so I'm going to use places and see what we have here. Okay, let's take all these. What's in there? Okay, let's put them together. Now I could put attributes here. Let's put age group. Let's see what happens. And columns. Okay, so I'm going to look at change, community change, economy, and natural environment. I think that's enough. And let's see what we get. Okay. So the sample project's only got partial data in it, but it's quite interesting to see here. So for those codes, community change, economy, and natural environment, we actually do have some data, and that's only by people that lived in Beaufort. So if they lived in Beaufort, this is what they said. Now, if this was my data set, I would know better what headings to pick, and we might have filled up the whole lot. But it's basically saying that the Down East communities didn't talk about, or haven't been coded, at least in this data set. Perhaps it's only partially coded in the sample project. It leaves work for you to practice on. So we've got community change, we've got economy, we've got natural environment. And these are the words that have been coded, but we don't know who has said what, because we asked for it to be by the case of Beaufort, by the community, by the place. If we'd asked by person, we'd have got a row for each person, and the case being the person. But this is quite nice because we can then use it and edit it if we want to, make our own notes or summaries. So this is the actual coded text. And sometimes that appears twice or it doesn't fit here. So you can use it interactively, or we can click on and we can export. And if I did that, it would export into Excel, into an Excel format. And I'm just going to go into help because I think that will be useful. And let's look at crosstabs. So you can see examples here. So again, to use crosstabs, you'd have to be using cases, which would mean you need to look at the stepping up NVivo. You can see here we can work with the person case, or we can work with the person in groups. So here we've got male, female, and then that's broken down into age groups. So it's dealing with those demographics. We don't know who has said what when we click on. We can find out because when we click on these on the cells, when we click on the cells, it takes us to the text, and so we could explore that and find out who did that, who made that talk. But according to the table in that way, without further interrogation of it, we wouldn't know. But again, these are all interactive. So again, we caution against you saying, yeah, this is quant data. I can do all this quantitative analysis. Sometimes you can, but again, discuss that with your supervisor, whether that's appropriate in your case. And yeah, just note caution in over quantifying some of these results. Because we don't know without looking what that text represents. But I thought that's a nice example of the kind of thing you might want to do, and then you'd be able to look at the cells and describe the cells perhaps with your framework matrix. Here's an example here, better one than the one I made. So we've got the codes here, what they'd said, and in this case, we've looked at what they've said and then made our own notes. And it's saying what group the person is in. But the author summary is very, very useful. So I'm just going to click on that. Author summary. Yeah, I haven't got another example of that there. But definitely encourage you to go into stepping up and looking at the matrices, the more advanced queries, because that's where you get a real power from having done that hard work, especially if you've manually coded your data. You would have put a lot of time and effort into making those codes and frameworks. So framework matrix, the node matrix, very powerful in their what they can do.